What happens when Hollywood's most beloved actress, known for her grace and warmth, walks into what should be a friendly morning chat show, only to discover she's been lured into an ambush? When Julia Roberts, the woman whose smile had launched 1,000 magazine covers and whose films had grossed billions worldwide, stepped onto the set of The View that Tuesday morning, she had no idea she was about to face the most brutal verbal assault of her 30-year career. This wasn't just an interview gone wrong. This was a calculated attack disguised as conversation, a public humiliation attempt that would backfire spectacularly, and a moment that would force millions of viewers to ask themselves, when did cruelty become confused with courage? And why do we celebrate those who tear others down? The Paramount Studios lot buzzed with its usual controlled energy that autumn morning. Production vans lined the streets, crew members hurried between sound stages, and in Studio 7, the set of The View glowed under the harsh brightness of television lighting. The daytime talk show had been a fixture in American homes for nearly 2 decades. A place where celebrity guests mixed with political debates, where hot topics were discussed over coffee, and where 5 women offered their perspectives on everything from entertainment to current events. Julia Roberts arrived early, as she always did. Professionalism had been drilled into her from her earliest days in the industry, and despite her astronomical success, despite the fact that she could make directors and producers wait for hours if she chose to, she never did. Her car pulled into the studio lot at 7:30, giving her plenty of time before the 9 o'clock live broadcast. She emerged wearing an elegant emerald dress that complemented her famous auburn hair, the color that had become as much her trademark as her luminous smile. In the green room, makeup artists fussed over her, though she needed little help. At 55, Julia remained stunning, her face showing character rather than age, laugh lines around her eyes speaking to decades of genuine joy rather than surgical intervention. She chatted easily with the crew, asking about their families, remembering names from previous visits, making each person feel seen and valued. It was this quality, this authentic warmth, that had made her not just a star but beloved. "Miss Morgan, we're so excited to have you today," a young production assistant said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "I've watched Pretty Woman probably 100 times. It's my comfort movie." Julia smiled that famous smile, the one that had graced movie posters worldwide. "That's so sweet of you to say. That film holds a special place in my heart too." "Joy is particularly excited about today's interview," the assistant continued, and something in her tone made Julia glance up sharply. But the young woman had already moved away, clipboard in hand, leaving Julia with a vague sense of unease she couldn't quite name. Joy Behar had been with The View since its inception, her sharp wit and sharper tongue making her the show's most controversial figure. Some viewers loved her for what they called her honesty and willingness to ask the tough questions. Others had stopped watching years ago, tired of her confrontational style, her tendency to turn every interview into an interrogation, her apparent belief that being provocative was the same thing as being profound. Over the years, Joy had developed a reputation for going after celebrities she deemed too perfect, too privileged, or too beloved. She seemed to take particular pleasure in trying to crack the polished facades of America's sweethearts, as if their very existence offended her, as if their success was somehow an insult to ordinary people rather than entertainment for them. And this morning, Joy Behar had set her sights on Julia Roberts. The other hosts knew something was off. Whoopi Goldberg, the show's moderator and voice of reason, had tried to talk to Joy before the broadcast. "What are you planning?" she'd asked, recognizing that particular gleam in Joy's eye, that energy that suggested she was loading up for something. "Just going to have an honest conversation," Joy had replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Isn't that what we do here? Have honest conversations?" Whoopi wasn't reassured, but what could she do? Joy had seniority, influence with the producers, and a fan base that saw her confrontational style as courage rather than cruelty. All Whoopi could do was hope to moderate the damage when it came. The countdown began. Stagehands made final adjustments. The audience settled into their seats, buzzing with excitement about seeing Julia Roberts in person. Many had arrived hours early, some clutching photos from movies that had meant something to them, others simply hoping to catch a glimpse of Hollywood royalty. 30 seconds to air, the stage manager called out. Julia took her position just off stage, ready to make her entrance. She'd done this hundreds of times: the walk-on, the wave to the audience, the settling into the guest chair, the easy banter. It was as natural to her as breathing. The show's opening music played. The lights brightened. The cameras went live. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The View," Whoopi Goldberg began, her warm voice filling the studio. "We have a truly special guest joining us today. She's won multiple awards, starred in some of the most beloved films of the past 3 decades, and has been called America's sweetheart by just about everyone. Please welcome the incomparable Julia Roberts." The audience erupted in genuine, enthusiastic applause. Julia emerged from backstage, her smile radiant, her wave graceful and warm. She moved down the short walkway with the easy confidence of someone who'd walked red carpets worldwide, pausing to acknowledge the audience's reception, making eye contact with people in the front rows, making them feel part of the moment. "Julia, so wonderful to have you here." Whoopi stood to greet her, and they embraced warmly. It was clear there was genuine affection between them. They'd known each other for years, had crossed paths at countless industry events, shared mutual respect. Julia made her way down the panel, greeting each host. Sarah Haynes gave her an enthusiastic hug, clearly starstruck. Sunny Hostin offered a professional handshake and a warm smile. And then there was Joy Behar. Joy remained seated while the other hosts had stood a small power play, subtle but deliberate. Her smile was present but cold, her eyes assessing rather than welcoming. "Julia," she said, extending her hand without standing. "Thanks for coming." "Joy," Julia replied pleasantly, taking the hand offered. She noticed the coldness, but chose to ignore it, settling into the guest chair with practiced ease. She crossed her legs comfortably, adjusted her dress, and looked around at the panel with open, friendly expectation. The first several minutes proceeded smoothly. Whoopi led the conversation, asking about Julia's latest film, a drama about family and forgiveness that was already generating awards buzz. Julia discussed the role thoughtfully, sharing insights into her character's motivations, talking about working with the director, expressing gratitude for her talented co-stars. "The emotional depth you bring to your roles has always been remarkable," Sunny commented. "Even in your lighter films, there's always something real underneath. That's rare." Julia nodded appreciatively. "I think that's what makes characters resonate with audiences. Even in a romantic comedy, even in a feel-good film, people need to recognize genuine human emotion. Otherwise, it's just empty." The audience applauded. This was the Julia Roberts they'd come to see, thoughtful, articulate, genuinely passionate about her craft. Sarah jumped in with questions about Julia's charitable work, her foundation that supported arts education in underprivileged schools. Julia deflected credit as she always did, focusing instead on the teachers and students who did the real work, on the transformative power of creativity, on how privileged she felt to give back in some small way. "Small way?" Sarah laughed. "Julia, you've donated over $40 million to arts programs in the last decade." Julia shrugged modestly. "I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. Using that good fortune to help others isn't charity, it's responsibility. It's gratitude." More applause. The energy in the studio was warm, positive, exactly what everyone had expected. But Joy Behar had been silent through all of this, watching, waiting, and now she was ready to strike. "You know, Julia," Joy's voice cut through suddenly, sharp and jarring, "I've been watching your career for a long time, and I have to ask, don't you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again?" The question hung in the air like a slap. The audience fell silent, confused by the sudden shift in tone. Whoopi's eyes widened slightly. Sarah and Sunny exchanged uncomfortable glances. Julia's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, letting out a small, uncertain laugh. "I'm not sure what you mean, Joy," she said carefully. "I've tried to take on a variety of roles throughout my career." "Oh, come on," Joy pressed, leaning forward with a grin that carried no warmth. "The romantic lead, the girl next door with a big smile, the woman who finds love and happiness. It's the same thing. Different movie, different costume. Don't you think audiences deserve more from someone with your supposed talent?" The word "supposed" landed like a bomb. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the interview veering into dangerous territory. "Joy, I think Julia has shown incredible range in her filmography," she tried to interject. But Joy wasn't finished. If anything, Whoopi's intervention seemed to embolden her. "I mean, let's be honest here," Joy continued, her voice taking on that particular quality of false reasonableness that barely concealed aggression. "You've made a career out of being America's sweetheart. But what happens when America gets tired of sweet? What happens when they want something real, something authentic, something that isn't just another pretty smile selling them a fantasy? Julia's posture straightened. The smile that had been her trademark disappeared completely, replaced by something harder, more guarded. When she spoke, her voice remained controlled, but there was steel underneath. I think my work speaks for itself, Joy. I've always tried to bring authenticity to every role I play, to find the truth in every character, regardless of the genre. Authenticity? Joy laughed, but it was a sharp, cutting sound that made several audience members wince. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you've been playing the same version of yourself for 30 years. The pretty woman, the romantic fantasy, the unattainable ideal that makes real women feel inadequate by comparison. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted completely. What had been a pleasant interview had become something else entirely. An ambush, an attack, a public humiliation attempt playing out in real time. Sunny tried desperately to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Julia, why don't you tell us about your upcoming projects? She suggested, her voice carrying a pleading quality. I know you have some exciting things in the works, but Joy wasn't about to let the conversation shift. She'd been planning this, preparing for it, and she was going to see it through regardless of how uncomfortable everyone else became. Actually, let's talk about something else, Joy said, her voice taking on an even more aggressive edge. Let's talk about privilege. Let's talk about how easy it is to maintain a perfect image when you've never had to face real adversity, real struggle, real life. Julia's eyes flashed with something dangerous, anger, hurt, disbelief, all mixing together. Excuse me? She said quietly, her voice dropping to a level that somehow carried more weight than shouting would have. You heard me, Joy continued, seeming emboldened by Julia's reaction, feeding off the discomfort she was creating. You've lived a charmed life, Julia, born beautiful, discovered young, handed success on a silver platter. What do you know about struggle? What do you know about the real world that the rest of us live in? What qualifies you to play all these roles about overcoming adversity when you've never actually had to overcome anything? The audience was completely silent now, no longer confused, but genuinely shocked. This had crossed far beyond tough questioning into something that felt personal, vindictive, deliberately cruel. Camera operators adjusted their positions instinctively, sensing they might be capturing something historic, not in a good way. Julia took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain her composure. Her hands, previously relaxed in her lap, had tightened into fists, knuckles white against the emerald fabric of her dress. When she spoke, her voice was steady but carried an underlying edge that suggested she was holding back far more than she was expressing. Joy, I think you're making some very unfair assumptions about my life, Julia said carefully, each word measured. You don't know anything about my journey or the challenges I've faced, don't I? Joy shot back immediately, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this response. Because from where I'm sitting, your biggest challenge has been choosing which mansion to live in, which designer dress to wear to which premiere, which multi-million-dollar role to accept next. Whoopi finally stepped in more forcefully, her voice carrying an authority that came from 2 decades of hosting. Okay, Joy, I think we need to— No, Whoopi, Joy interrupted, not even looking at her colleague. I think it's time someone asked the hard questions. I think it's time someone called out this whole perfect princess act for what it really is, a carefully constructed lie designed to sell movie tickets to people who should know better. Julia's face had gone pale, but her voice remained controlled, though it was clear the control was costing her. I've never pretended to be perfect, Joy. I've been open about my mistakes, my struggles, my growth as a person and an artist. Have you, though? Joy challenged, leaning forward even further, her body language aggressive, confrontational. Or have you just fed the public the sanitized, publicist-approved version of your life? When was the last time you showed us the real Julia Roberts, not the manufactured product designed to be palatable to mass audiences? The tension in the studio was now palpable, almost suffocating. Crew members stood frozen at their posts, unsure whether to intervene or let this disaster continue unfolding. Sarah looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Sunny's face showed genuine distress at what was happening, and Whoopi appeared to be calculating whether stopping the interview would cause more damage than letting it continue. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Julia said, and for the first time, her voice showed signs of real strain, of the emotional toll this was taking. I came here today to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, not to be personally attacked on live television. Joy leaned back in her chair with visible satisfaction, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was causing, feeding off it like sustenance. "Oh, is that what this is, an attack?" she said with mock innocence. "I thought this was just honest conversation. Isn't that what talk shows are supposed to be about? Honesty? Real dialogue? Or do you only want to participate in conversations where everyone tells you how wonderful you are?" "There's a difference between honesty and cruelty, Joy," Julia replied, and her composure was finally beginning to crack, emotion breaking through the professional facade. "There's a difference between asking tough questions and deliberately trying to hurt someone for your own entertainment." "Hurt someone?" Joy laughed again, that same harsh sound that was beginning to make everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "Sweetie, if a few honest observations hurt your feelings, maybe you're not as strong as you pretend to be. Maybe that's the real issue here. You can't handle reality intruding on your carefully constructed fantasy world." The words hung in the air like a physical slap, and Julia's face flushed red. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how Hollywood's sweetheart would respond to such a direct, personal insult delivered on live television before millions of viewers. "Strong?" Julia repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that somehow carried more power than any amount of shouting. "You want to talk about strength, Joy? Let me tell you something about real strength." The confrontation had reached its breaking point, the moment where pretense falls away and raw truth emerges. Joy Behar had pushed and pushed, assuming that Julia Roberts, trained by decades in Hollywood to smile and deflect, would never truly push back. But she had miscalculated badly, underestimating the steel beneath the silk, the fire beneath the warmth. Julia's voice, when she continued, carried a weight that made everyone in the studio lean forward unconsciously. "Strength is sitting here and listening to you tear me down for no reason other than your own entertainment. Strength is not responding to your cruelty with cruelty of my own. Strength is maintaining my dignity in the face of someone who's clearly forgotten what dignity means." Joy's eyes lit up with what could only be described as malicious delight, as if Julia's response was exactly what she'd been waiting for, what she'd been trying to provoke all along. "Oh, now we're getting somewhere," she exclaimed, her voice rising with excitement. "There's that fire I knew was hiding under all that sweetness and light. Tell me, Julia, how does it feel to finally drop the act?" "This isn't an act," Julia said, her voice rising slightly despite her obvious efforts to maintain control. "This is me trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism in the face of your unprovoked hostility. This is me trying to remember that I came here as a guest, not as a target." "Unprovoked?" Joy scoffed, her expression one of theatrical disbelief. "Everything I've said today has been fair game. You're a public figure, sweetheart. You put yourself out there. You open yourself up to criticism. That's the price of fame. And if you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be in this business." Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear through her chair. "Maybe we should take a quick break," she suggested weakly, looking desperately at the show's director through the camera. "No breaks," Joy declared, waving her hand dismissively like a queen refusing to acknowledge peasant concerns. "We're just getting started. Julia, I'm sorry. Julia, let's talk about your image. Let's talk about how much of your success is based on being pretty versus actually being talented." The gasp from the audience was audible. Several people looked genuinely angry now, not at Julia, but at Joy, at this woman who seemed determined to destroy someone for no apparent reason other than she could. Whoopi's voice cut through, sharp and authoritative in a way rarely heard from her. "Joy, that's enough. This has gone too far." But Joy ignored her completely, her focus entirely on Julia, like a predator that had caught the scent of blood and couldn't be called off. "I'm just asking questions that everyone's thinking but nobody has the guts to ask. How much of your career is based on your looks? How much is based on playing into male fantasies of the perfect woman? How much is actually based on talent?" Julia's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles had gone white. "I have never," she said, each word carefully enunciated, "reduced myself or my work to my physical appearance. I have spent 30 years honing my craft, studying, preparing, doing the work required to bring complex characters to life." "Complex characters?" Joy laughed bitterly. "Please, you play the same fantasy woman over and over. The beautiful, quirky girl who gets the guy in the end? That's not complexity, that's formula. That's giving audiences exactly what they want, so they'll keep paying to see you smile for 2 hours. Sunny Hostin, who'd been watching this disaster unfold with increasing horror, finally found her voice. Joy, I really think we need to redirect this conversation. Julia has done incredible dramatic work, serious roles that let her speak for herself, Joy snapped. Unless she can't. Unless I'm right and there's nothing beneath the surface. No depth, no substance. Just a pretty face with a practiced smile. The studio had gone deathly quiet. Even the crew members had stopped moving, frozen in place as they witnessed this extraordinary moment of television, not the good kind, but the kind that would be analyzed and dissected for years to come as an example of how badly things could go wrong. Julia stood up slowly, deliberately. The movement was powerful, transformative. Standing, she seemed to grow taller, stronger, more substantial. Her face, which had been showing strain and hurt, shifted into something harder, more resolved. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. You know what, Joy? You're right about something. You want to know what the real me is like? What's beneath the surface? Let me show you. She began removing her microphone, her movements precise and purposeful. The real me is someone who was told she was too tall, too awkward, too unusual looking to ever make it in Hollywood. The real me is someone who worked 3 jobs while going to auditions, who slept in her car more nights than she'd like to remember, who was rejected hundreds of times before anyone gave her a chance. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Julia held up a hand, silencing her with just that gesture. The real me, Julia continued, her voice growing stronger, more passionate, is someone who lost her mother to cancer when she was 23 and had to keep working, keep smiling, keep going because that's what her mother would have wanted. The real me is someone who's faced addiction, who's been through rehab, who's had to rebuild herself from nothing multiple times. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Joy's face had gone pale, suddenly realizing she'd opened a door she couldn't close. The real me is someone who's been through 2 divorces, who's struggled with depression, who's had to fight every single day to maintain the positivity and joy that you seem to despise so much. But I choose to focus on the light rather than the darkness. I choose to use my platform to bring joy rather than spread cynicism. And if that offends you, if that makes me fake in your eyes, then I genuinely feel sorry for you. Julia's voice dropped lower, more intimate, more devastating. You want to talk about privilege, Joy? Real privilege is sitting in that chair with a platform that reaches millions and using it to tear people down instead of building them up. Real privilege is having a job where you can attack others without consequences. Real privilege is assuming that because someone chooses kindness, they must be weak. She turned to look directly at the camera, addressing not Joy, but the audience at home, the millions watching this unfold in their living rooms across the country. To everyone watching, you don't need someone like Joy to validate your struggles by attacking someone else. Your pain isn't diminished by someone else's joy. Your challenges aren't invalidated by someone else's success. And anyone who tells you that cynicism is somehow more authentic than hope is lying to you. The studio audience erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but thunderous, sustained, emotional support. People were standing, some were crying openly. Many were nodding vigorously in agreement. They'd come expecting light entertainment and found themselves witnessing something profound. Joy sat frozen in her chair, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been shame. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed at a loss for words. Julia turned back to face Joy directly. I came here today in good faith, expecting a conversation about my work. Instead, I walked into an ambush by someone who seems to believe that destroying others makes her more authentic, and I'm done participating in it. She set her microphone on the chair and took a step toward the exit. Joy suddenly found her voice again, desperation creeping in. So, you're just gonna run away? That's what people like you do when things get uncomfortable, isn't it? Julia paused, turned back, and for just a moment, there was something almost pitying in her expression. No, Joy. People like me choose not to reward bad behavior with our presence. People like me refuse to participate in cruelty disguised as conversation. There's a difference between leaving and refusing to enable. Bad behavior? Joy's voice rose, defensive and angry. I was asking legitimate questions about a public figure who makes millions of dollars playing the same character over and over. And there it is, Julia interrupted quietly. You think my success is unearned. You think my work is meaningless. You think audiences are foolish for connecting with the stories I help tell. And that says everything about you and nothing about me. Whoopi Goldberg finally found her voice, trying one last time to salvage something from this disaster. Julia, please. I think there's been a misunderstanding. If we could all just take a step back? No. Whoopi, Julia said gently but firmly. Some things can't be fixed with a commercial break. Some behavior can't be excused or explained away. I've spent my entire career treating people with respect, crew members, co-stars, journalists, fans, everyone, and I refuse to stand here and let someone use me for target practice just because she thinks it makes good television. She looked at each host in turn. Her gaze on Sarah and Sunny was sympathetic. They clearly hadn't wanted any part of this disaster. Her look at Whoopi was sad she'd lost control of her own show. When her eyes met Joy's, there was no anger, just disappointment. You know what the real tragedy is? Julia said softly. We probably agree on more than we disagree. I'm sure we both want meaningful work, authentic storytelling, entertainment that respects its audience. But you're so consumed by the need to prove you're tougher, more cynical, more real than everyone else, you've lost sight of the actual goal. She took another step toward the exit, and Joy, unable to let her have the last word, called after her, Don't you dare walk away from me. We're not finished here. Julia stopped at the edge of the set, turned back one final time, and delivered her final statement with quiet devastation. Yes, we are. We're very much finished. Because I won't give you or anyone else permission to treat me like this. I won't normalize this behavior by participating in it. And I hope that everyone watching understands that walking away from toxicity isn't weakness, it's self-respect. And with that, Julia Roberts walked off the set of The View, her head high, her dignity intact, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a panel of shell-shocked hosts, and one very angry Joy Behar, who was still standing at the table, breathing heavily, looking like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The cameras continued rolling, unsure what else to do. Joy slowly sank back into her chair, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. She'd pushed one of Hollywood's biggest stars too far, had attacked someone beloved by millions, and had done it all on live television, with no ability to edit, to soften, to take back. Whoopi cleared her throat and looked directly into the camera, her face showing the strain of trying to maintain professionalism in a situation that had blown far past professional. We'll be right back after this break, she said, but her voice lacked its usual warmth and confidence. The damage had been done, and everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come, not as an example of brave journalism or tough questioning, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when cruelty masquerades as honesty and when someone finally says enough. As the show cut to commercial, the audience remained in their seats, buzzing with a mixture of excitement, disbelief, and anger. They had come expecting a typical celebrity interview, a pleasant morning diversion. Instead, they had witnessed one of the most dramatic confrontations in daytime television history, and their sympathies were entirely clear. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled to figure out how to handle the second half of the show without their scheduled guest. Network executives frantically made phone calls, trying to assess the damage, trying to determine whether this would be a ratings disaster or a viral moment. Social media teams watched in real time as clips from the interview began flooding Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform simultaneously lighting up with reaction. Julia's publicist, who'd been watching from backstage, immediately went into crisis management mode, not for Julia, but for the show that had just attacked her client. Phone calls were made, statements were prepared, legal implications were considered, but Julia herself, the center of this storm, simply got in her car and drove home. No statements, no angry social media posts, no immediate retaliation, just quiet dignity and the knowledge that she'd stood up for herself in a way that millions of people would recognize and respect. Within 30 minutes, social media exploded. The interview clips went viral, accumulating millions of views almost immediately. But the response wasn't what Joy Behar might have hoped for. People weren't praising her for tough journalism or asking hard questions. They were outraged at what they'd witnessed, an unprovoked attack on someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. Hashtags formed spontaneously. Number stand with Julia, number respect Morgan, number voices gone wrong. Within hours, they were trending worldwide. Celebrities began weighing in, directors and co-stars sharing stories of Julia's professionalism and kindness. Even people from different corners of the entertainment industry found common ground in defending her. "What I just watched wasn't journalism," tweeted acclaimed director Marcus Chen. "It was a public bullying session disguised as an interview." Julia Roberts is one of the most professional, dedicated actors I've ever worked with. She deserved better. Co-stars posted photos and memories. Julia spent every day on set, asking about crew members' families, learning their names, making everyone feel valued, wrote actor James Rodriguez. "That's who she is. Not an act, just genuine kindness." But the most powerful responses came from ordinary people. Teachers who shared how Julia's foundation had funded their arts programs, students who'd received scholarships, hospital staff who'd worked with her during quiet charity visits. These weren't calculated PR moves. These were real people sharing real experiences with someone who'd made a real difference in their lives. "Julia Roberts paid for my entire drama program at my school," wrote one young woman. "No press conference, no photo op, just support that changed my life." And Joy Behar has the nerve to call her fake? The backlash against Joy was immediate and severe. Advertisers began pulling sponsorship within hours. The show's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Network executives received thousands of complaints. The few who tried to defend Joy's approach found themselves drowning in criticism. By that evening, Joy Behar issued a statement, carefully crafted by lawyers and PR professionals. "I have enormous respect for Julia Roberts and her body of work." Today's conversation was meant to explore important questions about celebrity culture and authenticity. I regret if my approach caused any discomfort, and I hope we can continue this important dialogue. It was a classic non-apology, acknowledging something happened without taking responsibility for what that something actually was. Social media saw through it immediately. "I regret if my approach caused discomfort," one user mocked. How about, "I'm sorry I ambushed a guest and tried to humiliate her on live television"? That would be an actual apology. The pattern became clear as people dug into Joy's history. Clips of previous interviews where she'd similarly attacked guests were shared widely. A picture emerged of someone who used her platform not to inform or entertain, but to enforce her worldview and punish anyone who didn't conform to it. 3 days later, The View announced that Joy Behar would be taking a temporary leave to pursue other projects. Entertainment industry code for "we're removing you until this blows over and hoping everyone forgets." But people didn't forget. A month later, when Julia's latest film opened, it broke box office records. Audiences turned out in droves, not just because the film was good, but because they wanted to support her, to show that kindness and dignity still mattered, that choosing light over darkness was strength, not weakness. 6 months later, at the Golden Star Awards, Julia won Best Actress. When she took the stage to accept the award, the standing ovation lasted nearly 6 minutes. Her speech was brief, gracious, and characteristically focused on others. "I share this with everyone who's ever been told they're too much or not enough," she said, "with everyone who's ever chosen kindness when cruelty would be easier, with everyone who's ever walked away from toxicity and wondered if they were being too sensitive. You're not. Your boundaries are valid. Your dignity matters. And choosing peace over conflict doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise." The applause was deafening, and everyone knew what she wasn't saying, what she didn't need to say, that her confrontation with Joy Behar had been about exactly this, about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, refusing to participate in your own diminishment. What started as a routine promotional appearance had transformed into a cultural moment. A reminder that there's a difference between honest questions and hostile interrogation, between tough journalism and personal attacks, between being real and being cruel. Julia Roberts had walked away from that interview with her dignity intact and her principles uncompromised, and millions of people recognized themselves in that choice. The audience in that studio, and the millions watching at home, knew they'd witnessed something rare, not a manufactured controversy designed to boost ratings, but a genuine moment of someone standing up for themselves with grace under pressure. Who was right? Who went too far? The questions echoed across social media and coffee shops, but the answers were clear to anyone paying attention. This wasn't about being too sensitive or unable to handle criticism. This was about recognizing that cruelty disguised as honesty is still cruelty. that attacking someone isn't the same as interviewing them, and that walking away from toxicity isn't weakness, it's self-respect. The lights in that studio eventually dimmed. The crew broke down the set, the host went home, and Julia Roberts moved forward with her life, unchanged by the attention, secure in the knowledge that she'd done what needed doing. The story was retold countless times in the years that followed, becoming a cultural touchstone for discussions about celebrity culture, interview ethics, and the difference between accountability and attack journalism. But the core remained unchanged. The morning Julia Roberts reminded the world that choosing dignity over drama, kindness over cruelty, and self-respect over staying in toxic situations was not only acceptable, it was essential. And in the end, that was the lesson that resonated most deeply. Not that celebrities are beyond criticism, not that public figures don't owe anything to their audiences, but that everyone famous or not deserves to be treated with basic human respect, and that walking away when that respect is denied isn't running away. It's standing up in the most powerful way possible.